Well, g'day, Giles here. Today I'm going to be talking to you about one of the 3 pillars of physical performance that I've broken down into 10 subsets. But today the aspect is on speed, right? Our favourite, our absolute fave as athletes. And when I think of speed in terms of functionality, right? Is it functional or not? Does it relate to purpose or is it fantasy land? And when you think of speed generally, you're working to develop sustainable functional speed. That's what we train for. I mean, you can't drag your body kicking and screaming to form by using speeds that you can't possibly sustain, but that's what many of us do, right? When we get the ego involved. So the first subset I want to work in today is overspeed. And we're just going to touch on a few little aspects. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? And when you think of overspeed, that doesn't mean that you need to destroy your body and your lungs to do so. So here's a few examples. Swimming in a wetsuit and paddles gives a great overspeed effect. I found this myself. It gives you a much better feel for the water. It gives you a much higher speed that you're not really getting all that much in the pool. Another example is running. Running slight downhill grades gives a great overspeed effect and promotes cadence without sending your lactates to the moon and back. And motor pacing is just another weapon that we used in the group for overspeed, right, on the bike. And so it's just to think laterally about overspeed. How can I get speed without killing myself? And the next part of this are speed gears, right? The next tenet is speed gears. A great swim coach once said to me that I needed to have 5 different speeds at differing intensities, which is difficult to develop, but well worth it. And for me personally, that was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got as an athlete because it applies across the board. It's hands down the best way to get to know your own physical capacities as an athlete that I know of. So the next subset of speed, which I've talked about before, of course, is relaxing into speed. Do we really need to be tense? And this is really simple. If you can learn how to relax into speed, to give yourself that intention when you start the session, then it stands to reason that it's vastly going to improve your capacity to sustain it, right? We have this idea that speed equates to tension and effort, and it's not true. That's an idea, that's a belief. So practicing relaxing into your speed reps will give you more flow. It'll let the muscles in your face relax, for instance, and the energy will flow back into the performance levels, which is what you're trying to do. You're not trying to drain energy, you're trying to bring energy. You want to walk out of that session feeling energized by it, not flattened. Which brings me to the next subset, which is going into the red. If you're in the red, you're in the dead. People have this idea that anaerobic threshold or FTP means that we need to push right to the top of it, and it's not true. And not only that, it's not wise either. If you can touch the threshold zone without ruining yourself in the process, you're developing and evolving the speed. And not only that, you're evolving and developing it sustainably. And there's that word again, right? So it's always to zoom out and think about your speed longitudinally, right? And laterally. So you've got a zoomed out picture of what it is you're trying to achieve from your speed. And the next subset is cadence. Now, it's as critical as the speed itself, really, because your ability to force your aerobic system to work is another part of the conditioning pie. Speed is a measure of your aerobic power, of strength, of your conditioning and the body's ability to automatically fire. And that's what cadence is teaching it. So if you ignore cadence, you're ignoring it at your own peril as an athlete. Cadence is an aspect of speed that you need to draw on technically that feeds back into your process and your race day. And the next subset, of course, the one I always belt on about is form. Because it's not about what, it's about how. Speed is a byproduct of form. You can't swim and ride or run fast without great form. For instance, swimming fast requires a lack of tension. Bike speed requires power and smooth form. Running requires the correct lean angles to make the most of the gravity so you're efficient and relaxed and moving easily. So the next part of this whole pie is the recovery speed tenet of this thing. So one of the key indicators of form that I saw as a coach, that I see as a coach, is the speed of the recovery, right? So from what I've personally witnessed, there were those who were recovering at higher speeds, those who recovered at higher speeds were more likely to race well. And that's something that you build over time. So the effort speed itself is firstly sustainable, and then the recovery can be manipulated to give it better speed. So rather than fast, slow, you have fast, medium. And this lends itself to higher aerobic function and better lactate buffering capacity over time. But you need to bring awareness. You need to bring the zoomed out picture so that you can know that. And the next subset that I'm going to discuss is God, leave the junk alone. Especially if you're one of my athletes listening to this, leave the junk alone. Those sessions that don't really serve any purpose, the ones that aren't fast enough to stimulate threshold or too fast to stimulate aerobic capacity that many age group athletes fall into the trap of or are guilty of. And furthermore, it's no problem if you're happy with that, but just know it's cutting off your speed at your knees because your heart's a muscle. If you're full of neuromuscular fatigue from grey area training, your heart's going to fail to fire when you need it most. And that's just going to lead you into a land of the plateaued heart rates and speed. You're going to lose your heart rate variability because you're full of junk. You're full of neuromuscular fatigue. You're not a machine. You can't keep belting into the grey area and think you're going to come back. And when we think of speed work, we need to think of speed work like herbs on a meal. Use speed works like you would use herbs on a meal. If you dump too much herbs on a meal, it overwhelms it, right? Tastes disgusting. The same's true of speed work. Use it sparingly and it will certainly add to the taste of the meal and the function of the process. So that's just the metaphor that we're using for this overall picture of speed, right? So it's just about zooming out, identifying what it is you want to get from your speed work. And what you want to get from your speed work is functionality. Functionality is king. Consistency is king. Development is king. Evolution is king. So don't do today what you can't sustain tomorrow. Don't injure yourself today if it's going to cost you 2 weeks more off trying to recover from an injury that need not have occurred had you have had enough awareness around that speed session. Speed is gold. Speed is pure enjoyment. Get into it, but temper it. Bring great awareness to it and you'll really develop. Thanks for listening.